Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today I have been so excited to finally do this video with you guys, and that is to discuss the highly anticipated film from Martin Scorsese, Killers of the Flower Moon. It feels like forever that we were exposed to this one image of this film, and from that moment I was excited to see what Scorsese had in store for us next. And that time has finally came, and I want to discuss it with you guys. So let's get into it. So like everyone, I'm of course a fan of Martin Scorsese and his work. He is a highly respected master filmmaker that has done tons of films, tons of well-respected films, and he's never dropped off. So many directors, they're like an athlete in a way where they go through their prime, where they have all of these great ideas and a new style, and then eventually they fade off, and if they last too long, they're kind of a shell of themselves. Martin Scorsese has just never had that. Even with the films that I don't love as much from him, I can see the quality behind them. They're by no means bad films, and he just keeps that going. In terms of more recent history, I have mostly really enjoyed what he's done. I love Shutter Island. I'm a white male, so of course I love The Wolf of Wall Street. That is just a given. I have yet to see Silence, but it's definitely on the radar. And I have seen The Irishman, which I wasn't a fan of because I really felt the runtime there. That was 3.5 hours long, and it just didn't need to be. And seeing that Killers of the Flower Moon was, I think, 3 minutes shorter than The Irishman, made me a little bit nervous for this because I was thinking that we might get more of the same here, and this is just what Martin Scorsese is going to do now as he's matured as a filmmaker. He wants to be a lot more meditative with his work, and he really showcases a lot of honest filmmaking and empathy. Not that he didn't before, but it's just very obvious now. He never wants to force his opinion on you. He wants to show you what happened in this very entertaining yet informative way, and then he lets you make up your own mind as to if these characters are good or bad people. Most of the time they tend to be bad people. For example, with The Wolf of Wall Street and Jordan Belfort, his actions are obviously deplorable. He's not seen as this excellent person. He does all of these horrible acts that to this day have robbed tons of people of money. Yet the film doesn't really want to shove down your throat that he's a bad person. It makes it so blatantly obvious through what he's doing that you can make up your own mind and figure that out for yourself. And that's relevant to Killers of the Flower Moon because we get a lot of that here. There are a lot of heinous acts in this film that are truly barbaric and full of manipulation, greed, and corruption that were just rampant through this era in this location. Yet Martin Scorsese wants to give you a whole perspective of all of these characters and trust the audience enough to make up their own mind as to if these actions are good or bad, or if this character is good or bad. And that can be seen the most clearly through Leonardo DiCaprio's character. He does some questionable things in this movie. I'm not going to go into detail, but he does some very questionable things here that make you think that he's a pretty bad person. But he also has a softer side to him, especially with his family and his wife, Molly, who is one of the last members of this Native American family that hold a lot of wealth in this area. And that's where the film kind of kicks off. The white people that have come into these towns, they would marry into these families in order to gain their wealth. And this film really goes into that. There's a lot of scheming and very sneaky acts from these people that slowly take away from the Native Americans. And the 3.5 hour runtime probably is a good way of illustrating all of that, although I do have some flaws with that runtime. It's also great to see a lot of Martin Scorsese's spiritual side play out in this film. He's a very spiritual person, a religious person, and he always finds a way to even subtly put that into his films. And this is definitely like that. It's not a religious film, as Martin Scorsese has said in an interview. it's a spiritual one, and it definitely feels that way. And there's some great moments that really illustrate that in this film. Going into the performances, of course, they're amazing. You look at the cast, what do you expect? Leonardo DiCaprio giving a good performance is a given at this point, and he continues to just knock it out of the park. He is the greatest actor alive, in my opinion. I really think that, and this is just another example as to why he doesn't miss. Whenever he's in a movie, he enhances the movie a lot just through the power of his performance. And he definitely has some very showy scenes that would get clipped in an Oscars compilation kind of scenario. However, there's been a lot of talk about saying that this is either his best or close to his best performance. I don't agree with that statement at all. It's a great performance. Do not get me wrong. It deserves an Oscar nomination for sure. But to say that this is his best, I think that's a bit much and a lot of recency bias. This dude has given some of the greatest performances that we have ever seen. And to just throw this out there as his best, I just don't really see it. There are a lot more nuances to his character that I did appreciate. He's not always screaming and giving big maximalist moments like he does in The Wolf of Wall Street. There's a lot more nuance there. There's a lot more quiet moments, and the way that he might say something or the way that he reacts to something is all very important here. And the amount of restraint that Leonardo DiCaprio was able to show in this role was definitely impressive. You also have Robert De Niro as almost like this antagonistic, in a very interesting way, character where on the surface he's a good guy. And I think that's how a lot of bad people in reality actually are. On the surface they are a good person and usually well liked amongst their peers and their community. However, they're not. There's a lot of behind the scenes things. There's a lot of manipulation in there that make them this terrible person. And Robert De Niro just plays that to perfection, I think. I think that he is definitely deserving of a supporting actor nomination, hands down. Then, I saved this one for last. Lily Gladstone. Everyone is talking about her performance. And this is definitely a breakthrough role for her. She is incredible. There are moments in this that really made me feel emotional because the pain that this character goes through, she conveys it brilliantly. The sound of her voice or her scream or her face, it says everything and it hits you like a truck in the moments where it really needs to. So I have to really commend this performance. It was absolutely fantastic. Now, she's being campaigned in lead for the Oscars, and I never really saw her as a true contender before seeing this movie. I think she is a little bit more of a contender, but to put her in lead, I think that's a little bit unfair because she's kind of in a middle ground, I think, where she definitely has a beefier performance than a supporting role, but it's a lot less than a lead. I wouldn't call her a lead. Regardless, she's fantastic and delivers every single scene she's in. All of the strongest moments in this movie, I think, were scenes that featured Leonardo DiCaprio and Lily Gladstone. 100%. I also just really have to respect Martin Scorsese's ability to really trust his audience here and provide something that is just so mature in its tone. There's so much empathy here, and you can just tell that you're watching a film made by a mastermind. It is just stunning work that is so technically impressive. The cinematography is outstanding. There's a lot of those trademark moments that you expect in a Martin Scorsese movie. There's a needle drop here and there. Not as much as we're used to, but there are a couple. There are Dutch angles. There's all of these different framing devices that you would expect from a Martin Scorsese movie. The production design is also fantastic. His movies are getting these crazy budgets, and guess what? He doesn't blow it on stupid cartoon effects in the background. He makes a real production. These are real sets that are built that are probably enhanced a little bit by a bit of green screen or blue screen, but the majority of it is actually there. It's tangible. These costumes and these buildings are all real, and I really appreciate the authenticity that this film really wants to bring you. It's so easy to immerse yourself in this experience and this film, because of the production value. Now, there's all this talk about the runtime, and I really want to get into this now because I am really starting to think that his films are too long. Wolf of Wall Street felt like an exception. That was 3 hours long, that movie, but it felt like 2. For the longest time, I thought that movie was genuinely 2 hours long until I just looked on the back of the Blu-ray and I saw that it said 3 hours, and I was like, oh my god, that's a 3-hour movie? I had no idea, even though I'd seen that movie plenty of times before that point. And that's because the pacing is electric. It's throwing one thing at you after the next. It's constantly exciting. That movie could go on for hours upon hours upon hours, and you would never get bored. Was truly genius work from Martin Scorsese. Then he went to The Irishman, which was a lot more slower and kind of targeted to a more mature demographic. I feel like definitely one above their 50s. Not saying that people younger than that can enjoy it, but it felt really tailor-made to that demographic, I felt. And that movie did not need to be that long. There were long stretches where I was like, okay, come on, we don't need this. Let's get to the parts that really matter. Let's get into the masterful sides of your filmmaking rather than just bloating it all out with all of this stuff. The Irishman was a tough experience for me. It wasn't a film that I really particularly enjoyed, even though I respect the hell out of it. Killers of the Flower Moon is kind of in a middle ground, I feel like. I didn't feel like I had my time wasted as much as The Irishman, for lack of a better word. But the runtime does hurt this film. This film did not need to be as long as it did. There were moments where I genuinely felt exhausted. There were moments where I just got taken completely out of the film because I was just starting to feel a little bit bored. I'm not going to lie to you. That happened a number of times. And that wouldn't have happened if the runtime was so blown out. I think we could have cut it down to maybe 3 hours or 250. And that probably would have been right in the sweet spot. That's still a long movie, and I would be fine with that. But the 3 hours 20 just became too much. Luckily, it does pick things up a lot, I think. By the time it ends, it leaves a lot for you to ponder on and does some really interesting things with stuff that you wouldn't expect it to. Like a lot of films that tell a story about something that really happened, there's that text at the end of the film about what happened after the events of the movie. This one doesn't really do that, but it really does something very innovative that has a similar effect, but I thought a lot more better, I felt like, a lot more effective. But before that third act, there were moments that just weren't hitting like I wanted it to. There were moments where it did feel dull. That is 100% how I felt during this film. To me, it almost feels like Martin Scorsese, he understands his vulnerability as a filmmaker. He understands his age and that he doesn't have that many more movies left. I heard something that he thinks that he might only have one more movie after this movie. So I understand that he might want to get out as much as he possibly can with the movies he has. He wants to make them as big as possible, get in as many scenes as possible, explore everything, not having to be restrained so much. I totally get that. You've put in so much good work over the years. It's about time that you treated yourself a little bit with these films. I get that. But I have to criticize these movies for what I see, and what I saw was a far too long film that hurt this a lot in some ways. As I said, I think that this movie is fairly engaging throughout, very compelling. I highly recommend you check it out. It is a great film, but I do have a problem with that runtime. And it's not only the runtime as well. Martin Scorsese wants to spend a lot of time on one thing and then not so much on another thing that might need enhancing. And I think that's where you also start to feel the runtime, because some things are getting rushed and then some things aren't. It doesn't happen all the time, but there was a moment here or there where I felt that. And I think, once again, if we tighten that runtime up and we chop out some things that don't need to be really in the movie unless you want the big director's cut, and then maybe lengthening those sequences that really need it, you can really flesh it out properly, I think. There were just moments that just weren't concise enough. We don't need to know every detail about every single person, okay? It's just too much. If you're learning how to write, the first thing that they tell you, whether that's academically or if you're writing a story, is to write with conciseness. And these latest Martin Scorsese films don't really have that conciseness, I feel like. But overall, Killers of the Flower Moon is a great film. It deserves all of the Oscar nominations it's 100% going to get. The performances are fantastic. Scorsese's direction is as expert and masterful as ever. And I'm really, really impressed with what he can manage to pull off with his age. He's just killing it. He's always a joy to listen to as well. You can just tell the amount of knowledge he has and the passion he has for cinema. And I really do appreciate everything that he brings to the table here. A great film that I do recommend you check out. Definitely see it in a theater too. This thing was made for a theater. I know it's coming to Apple in the future. Try to check it out in a theater first. The sound really pops, and there are just great moments that were made for the big screen. The big score, the great production design, the costumes, it all just gets enhanced so much more on that big screen. So definitely try to check it out at the cinema if you can. I'm going to give Killers of the Flower Moon a 4 out of 5. Just a great film. Anyway, those are my thoughts towards Killers of the Flower Moon. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. Is the runtime thing an issue with you? Do you think I'm just being too impatient? Let me know in the comments. I'm really starting to feel it. I know that is a very lively debate. Some people like it, some people don't. I tend to be on the side that doesn't. But that's just my opinion. I'd love to hear yours. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.